All right, guess what I'm going to be playing with for the next 2 days? Da, 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 the Nikon Z8. So recently I got the opportunity to test the Nikon Z8, and when I say that it could potentially be the best hybrid mirrorless camera so far, you guys are going to be shocked on the 3 reasons why, and I think Nikon might have Sony beat. Let's get into it. Okay, so yes, there are 3 main reasons why I think the Nikon Z8 could potentially beat its competitors within the same price range, such as the Canon R5 and the Sony A7R5. I'm going to be comparing these 3 cameras specifically. Although I have not used the R5, I have not used the Sony A7R5, just reviewing and researching the specs, this is why I think Nikon could potentially have Sony and Canon beat when it comes to the Z8. So before we get into my 3 reasons and then the overall video, I do want to talk about the dope experience I had going to Nikon's creator camp for the first time. The fact that Nikon even found me, I don't know how, because I never owned a Nikon and I've never used a Nikon. So this is a very unbiased video where I'm just trying to give you guys the best information as much as possible. And I don't think it's about one camera being better than the other. It's really just about learning about another camera that could potentially be an option when you're searching for your next hybrid mirrorless camera. So sent me out to Catskills, New York, to test out the Nikon Z8 with some other creators who were super dope. And I think it was just a really cool experience. They provided props and models and different situations for us to shoot in. They didn't have any expectation for us. They didn't ask us to actually shoot footage for them or make a YouTube video. So this YouTube video is not sponsored by them. I wanted to create it for myself and for you all, and to really just test out what I really thought about the Z8 and using a Nikon for the first time. This is coming from a Sony user and a Canon user, and I honestly feel like there are 3 big reasons why I think the Z8 stacks up with the rest. The first reason why I think that this camera can stack up with its competitors or potentially be in the top 3 or the #1 spot is because, 1, it has ProRes RAW internally. It has your Apple ProRes RAW and it has ProRes 422 internally in the body. Like, you don't have to use an external monitor to get ProRes 422 or ProRes RAW when it comes to this mirrorless camera. Now, I don't know any other mirrorless camera that has comparing it to the R5, the Canon R5 and the A7R5 that has ProRes in the camera, you do have to use an external monitor such as the Atomos or anything like that to get that option. So the fact that it did have ProRes in there was a plus for me. And to me, that is one of the biggest wows that I had about learning about the camera. It's like, wow, I don't need an external monitor to get ProRes RAW, ProRes 422. The second reason why I think that this camera should be discussed and is a really great camera and really caught my eye or caught my attention was the fact that it has more frame rates for you. So we all know you get 24 frames, 30, 60, and 120 in a lot of these cameras. You know, a lot of people are shooting 48 frames per second. Gives you a really great sweet spot. If you don't want to go 60 and get super slow-mo, you want to keep that same look in a sense if you don't want to slow it down in post. So a lot of people have been shooting 48 frames per second. And the fact that it gives you 50 frames per second and 100 frames per second is a sweet spot to me. So you have your 23, or your 24, you have your 30, you have your 50, you have your 60, you have your 100 and your 120. So sometimes 120 may be a little too slow and 60 may not be slow enough. Now you have 100 frames per second, which is like right in the middle, and then you have 50 frames per second that comes from 30 and 60. So that was the second reason, having ProRes RAW or ProRes 422, and then also having some additional frame rates for you to play with. As a filmmaker, being able to have more options is always going to be better. Now, the third reason why I really like this camera, and it really piqued my interest if I had money to get another hybrid mirrorless camera, is they have this high-speed zoom effect. Now, this was interesting to me because when we go into post, we always want to zoom in and post. You know, we shoot wide and say we'll scale it in, we'll zoom in and post, shoot 4K so we can have more room to punch in. But the fact that you can do this on location while you're recording, you don't have to stop the camera. You can do it while recording and creates this really smooth zoom in effect 2 times wherever your focal length is, was really dope to me personally. And the cool thing about that is that it doesn't only work for zooms, it also works for primes. So let's say you're at a 50 mil and you need to zoom in, you want to get tighter than a 50. You have the option to do a really nice slow zoom, and I think it samples from your 8K, so you're not losing resolution, and you're not losing any, it's not getting pixelated or anything like that. It's still providing a really nice quality for you, and so I thought that that was super dope. Like, you don't have to wait to do it in post. You can do it with your zooms. Even when you're using zooms, you try to manually zoom, and it's not as smooth. Well, the fact that you have this effect in camera, like, to be honest, I was just like, wow, I never even thought about that. So those 3 really piqued my interest. Outside of all the specs, like I said, they all do 8K. They all have your nice image stabilization. The autofocus on all of these cameras are great. They've all beefed it up. So there's no more Sony has the best autofocus. Canon can compete, and Nikon can compete. So these are very competitive hybrid cameras, and I just think it's only fair and only right to put Nikon, at least the Z8, within that conversation. And so not even that, they have a skin softening feature. So if you do want to add a little you know, if you're doing photography or filmmaking, you want to soften the skin a little bit. The fact that they added waveform. Y'all know I'm not a histogram person. You guys know I'm not really a zebra person. I like to use the features that actual pro cinema cameras use, which is like your false color, your waveform. You know, I use waveform in post as well when it comes to exposure. So I like to use those type of features in my mirrorless cameras as well. So the fact that you do get histogram, you can get zebras, but they also added waveform, so you can look at that when you're trying to get your exposure, was also another plus for me, because again, to me, it's about workflow and the details matter. Like, waveform is just better to me personally. But even with the ergonomics, it reminded me a lot of Canon, and it has a really nice grip and it feels good in your hand. The size is pretty much, to me, honestly, the same. But overall, this is a really nice camera. And again, I've always felt like their colors were really great, very consistent. Out of all the cameras that I've used, again, I've used Canon, I've used Sony, and I've never even used Nikon until this time. And I've always felt, though, just looking at their pictures, that they've always had great neutral, consistent colors. Now, that's to each his own, because some people prefer Canon and some people prefer Sony colors. But again, this is just all my opinion anyways. But I think it's just so dope because I've been wanting to test the Nikon for a long time, and I think even just the workflow with taking it into post and coloring it was very interesting to me. Now, one of the creators that was there, his name is Kalen, and he provided, he literally created a Nikon LUT on the spot. So that was what I used for like the basic coloring, and then I played upon that, and it felt really easy to color grade personally, and I really liked the overall workflow from the production to the post-production, and it was very seamless and very smooth. I played around with 8K, I played around with 4K, I played around with H.265 and in RAW, and I didn't have any issues when it came to editing in Premiere on my computer. Now, one thing I do want to note that they said, and I haven't really researched more from that, was that for the 8K, you can only really play with it in DaVinci, and I think what they might have meant is that you can only change the settings, a little bit more of the settings in DaVinci. When Final Cut and Premiere, you can't do that. So that's something that I do want to tap more into as well, to like figure out exactly what they meant by that. And then another con that I feel like might be when people are talking about Nikon, the Z8 specifically, or any mirrorless camera that are jumping into Nikon, is that I don't know how their lens ecosystem works on if you can get an adapter and add on multiple lenses and cinema lenses and all of these, or if the flying distance plays a part and being able to use other lenses, or if you really, once you get into Nikon's ecosystem, you have to be in Nikon's ecosystem. That is something I'm also researching. We did not get to keep the cameras, so I was not able to do more research on this camera. So I'm really just kind of giving you like a first impression of what I thought and what I've played with while I was out there on location. But all in all, it's a really good camera, and it really does stack up with its competitors, which is why I compared it to the R5, the Canon R5 and the Sony A7R5, because a lot of people ask me what's a good camera to purchase, or what's a really great hybrid mirrorless camera. And you know, I don't want to be unfair and not include this camera in the conversation, because it really is a good camera. Now, Nikon does need to do a better job at bringing in its creators to create that content and use it as marketing and do all these things. Even researching the Nikon Z8, it wasn't a lot of videos from normal creators, and you get so many more videos about Sony and Canon. And so, you know, I understand all the jokes, and I understand people moving from Nikon who had it or don't think about Nikon because they didn't do a great job in their marketing. They have not done a great job in any of that, or building a creator community. But even just them sending a lot of us out there, I think that they're trying. And outside of that, it's just a really good camera. Now, I can't speak on its predecessors or the cameras before the Z8 because I've never used them. So I've heard the Z9 is very similar, but the Z8 is all of what the Z9 is in a way smaller body, which I prefer smaller. Now, we all know that Nikon is the butt of all the jokes. It's just so much, and they're all fun. However, I think it does tear away from people even being interested in Nikon, or Nikon being in the conversation about being a good camera brand when it comes to filmmakers. And I know that they've been behind the curve. Trust me, I get it. But I think they truly turned it around with the Nikon Z8. So I definitely advise you all to just check it out. Let me know your thoughts. You know, is it something that you would consider when you're thinking about your next hybrid mirrorless camera if you don't have one already? Is it worth it to you? Some of the things that I've said, my top 3, is that something that you guys are interested in? If you have any questions, let me know. I got really cool with some of the Nikon team. So if you have questions, I could truly go back and ask them and just get a lot of more information. Maybe I might know the answer to them. But let's start the conversation. Let's start the dialogue and really just kind of talk about it and see if it's worthy to be in this whole like conversation when it comes to hybrid mirrorless cameras. Forgetting their past and trying to move forward with what they're coming out with now. So thank y'all so much for watching. I hope I gave you all the information. I'm trying to think what else I would want to talk about when it comes to this camera. Yeah, that's all I got. I just had a good time, and I really enjoy playing with Nikon. I think that I just want to be fair on giving you guys the best, as much information as I can before somebody asks me to be an ambassador. Because once that happens, I'm going to have to switch it up. No, I'm just kidding. I do want to give you all the information so you can make the most informed decision when it comes to your money, and when it comes to your creativity, and when it comes to getting a camera that's going to kind of motivate and inspire you to create content. So thank y'all so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure that you share this with your friends, anybody that has a Nikon or is interested in getting a hybrid mirrorless camera. And yeah, let's start the conversation. Love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.